Welcome to Surviving as a Civilian. This podcast tells the stories of veterans, emergency service workers, and first responders. These stories help understand how our guests have gone through significant traumatic incidents and how they dealt with it afterwards. Content warning, language, and descriptions of events may be sensitive to some listeners. Welcome to Surviving as a Civilian. I am Scott, here with David. David, how are you today?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm okay. Thanks for asking. David, I just want to jump right into it. So how old were you when you joined the military?
I was 17. I was in high school.
And what year was that?
2000. Well, I think I actually joined in 2006 under the delayed entry program. And then I was 18 when I graduated and went to boot camp.
Okay, so what made you decide to join the Army at such a young age?
Well, it's going to sound pretty cliche, but I think even at that age, I had a very strong sense of duty. 9/11 was a vivid memory of mine, and I had an uncle who was a career military guy, and I think at the time I really wanted to do something that was bigger than me, and I had always had a real deep appreciation for the military. I did a project in high school on Pat Tillman, kind of telling his story from the best that I could, and I think doing work like that really pushed me to go the military route. I really love my country, and at the time it seemed like the war in Iraq was big and Afghanistan was big, and it just seemed like people were needed, and it just was something that I wanted to do.
So you obviously you picked the Army, correct?
Yeah.
What made you decide to pick the Army over the other services?
Well, I talked to my uncle a little bit, who, like I said, I think at this time he was I believe he was a Fulberg colonel. And I talked to him a little bit. I didn't have any other military influence. When we talked about the different branches, and I think he mentioned the Marine Corps. I knew that I wanted to be a ground pounder. I had a buddy in high school who him and I were actually going to join together and kind of go through the Ranger program and go the Ranger route. And I really was pretty infatuated at the time with the Ranger Regiment, and that's just what I wanted to do. I think. The Marines was another option. My uncle told me at the time that the Marines were a smaller unit. They were pretty tight-knit. But I think I just had my mind set on the Rangers for whichever reason, and that's what I went in for. I didn't go that route, obviously. But
so what did you end up choosing for your MOS, for your job?
Well, I ended up becoming a combat engineer. It was kind of interesting when I went up for the MEPS, which is like the day you go up and do all your different tests, and when you actually sign up, I didn't pass I think it was like the eye exam for infantry. So they told me that I couldn't go infantry because something was wrong with my eyes. So anyways, I sat down. Yeah, I think, honestly, from what I remember, I had I don't want to say pink eye, but I had some eye infection that day, and it really screwed me up. Which kind of irritated me in the long run. But either way, so I sat down with the guy at the station up there, and we're kind of going through what I was eligible for, and I'm like, well, what's something close to infantry that I can do? And he's like, well, you can become a combat engineer. And I'm like, what's that? He basically explained it like you're basically infantry with demolitions knowledge. You learn how to blow things up, but you're still doing a lot of the same duties. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool.
That's nuts. So you end up going to basic training at the age of 18, correct?
Yes.
And you went to Fort Leonard Wood, I'm assuming, because you were an engineer?
I did, yeah. In June. I think I left in June of 2007.
So I was older when I joined and went through basic, but what was it like joining the military, being in basic training at the age of 18?
Well, there was a long time where I thought that the first day of basic, well, not the very first day, but the first day that we got to our company, I thought was the worst day of my life. it was very much a shock to me, just because, I had a pretty good upbringing, and, I worked in high school, I had various jobs, but by no means did I have anything like hard in my life. And then I got to my company at boot camp, and the second we got off the bus, and we were getting screamed at, and just for things that were like not even in our control. They put like 30 of us in this tiny little room, and we all had to dump out our bags and excuse me, it's in my throat. So everybody's stuff is everywhere, and the drill instructors are screaming at us to get all our own stuff back and put it in our own bags, and it was impossible because the floor is like filled with everybody's stuff. And so, anyways, it was a big change in my life. But looking back on it, it's kind of funny. It's kind of a joke, but I think at the time that was like probably one of the worst things I'd experienced as an 18-year-old.
So you graduated AIT. What was your first duty station?
I got sent to Fort Hood.
Okay, what was Fort Hood like? For you?
It was interesting. So I got there. I want to say in early January. It was right after New Year's. I didn't have much time at home. I was at home for the holidays, but I left right after that. And when I got assigned to my unit was still deployed. So we were on rear detachment. And actually, I met Will McKinney. We both got to Fort Hood about the same time, and we're on rear detachment together. And so the intro was kind of weird because we were there for about 3 months, or I guess it was about 2 months. Our unit came back in March. So, but
so compared to I forgot to ask this, David. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, so what was that the first time you'd been like away from home for that long a time? And where are the other places you've been to?
At that time, we traveled quite a bit. My family did. I'd been to California. I remember we did a big California trip when I was like a sophomore or something in high school.
Okay, so going across the country to go live was probably not that big a deal for you then.
No. I'd never been to Texas, and I'd never been away from home, so that was probably the biggest part of it.
Yeah.
On my own,
Was the Army culture a shock to you at that time?
It was definitely different, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked the structure, and I try to think back on like if I had gone to college, would I have been successful? Honestly, I probably wouldn't have. I think I really needed that guidance. But it was interesting. The Army kind of seemed to me like it really is just a job while you're stateside. You're doing your 9 to 5 for the most part. Well, not really 9 to 5, but aside from PT. But and you get your weekends off for the most part. So it's kind of just like a job, but I had like my entire life scheduled, or
right.
Somebody was telling me what to do.
Always somebody watching.
Exactly, yeah.
So did you deploy from Fort Hood?
I did, yeah. So that first year, I was at Fort Hood was 2008, and like I said, our unit came back in March. They had been on a 15-month deployment. I think, from my understanding, they got extended right after November, or right after Thanksgiving. So they'd been on a long deployment, and then when they came back, it was just, the way things were working at that time was just units were rotating in and out of deployments, and so they came back, and we kind of just got right into deployment prep for the next deployment, which came in, for me, January. I think they started sending guys early in December, but yeah, we deployed out of Fort Hood in January to Kuwait. We were in Kuwait for about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And then we were supposed to go to Mosul. I think that's what they started telling all of us. And then at the last second, that changed. We ended up going to Kirkuk, which is in northern Iraq.
Okay, what was that deployment like? Actually, let me back up. What was your job for that deployment?
So we did a lot of route clearance. I think that was probably our main focus. We were on a big base a lot of the time, Fob Warrior, which was an air base. Back whenever we took Kirkuk, they took their Kirkuk airport and basically made it a Fob Warrior, an air base. So we ran most of our missions out of there for route clearance, and then we would do some work out of smaller outposts. There was a combat outpost, McHenry, which was about an hour away from Fob Warrior. So route clearance was our main focus. We did a lot of work with the little villages and towns. I couldn't tell you the big job description of what we were doing, but I knew that we were trying to give aid to local farmers, money and whatnot, so they could grow their own crops and basically kind of help them sustain their own towns without our help and without, or kind of get back on their feet.
What was?
So we did a mixture.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
What was your job specifically?
So I kind of bounced around a little bit. I was a driver. We had basically three platoons, red, white, and blue platoon, and all of us kind of just ran, like, looking back on it, we just ran shifts basically. So the red platoon would be out during the daytime, for example, and then blue platoon would go out at night, and it would alternate between the three. So I started as a driver, and then I bounced around a little bit. I was a gunner for a little while. That's really what I can remember as far as what my jobs were.
Did anything you care to share with us that was that sticks out in your mind, significant on that deployment?
Yeah, I mean, there was. It's hard to think back on sometimes. There's a few, incidents that stick out. We got blown up every now and then. There was a few times where I remember this mission we went out with EOD pretty often, the explosive ordnance guys. We generally used Air Force EODs. Sometimes the Navy EOD. But we work mostly with Air Force EOD, and they would go out with us kind of attached to us, and they just have one or two trucks. They go out with our convoy. And we went out on this mission, and I remember leaving the gate, and the turret on the. So I'm sorry, let me back up. They had to put like one or two of us from our company with the EOD guys as like a liaison in their truck or whatever. And we're going out. We leave the gate, and I'm sitting in the back of their truck, and I look up, and nobody's in the turret. And I'm like, what are you guys going to get up there? And one of the Air Force guys is like, nah, man, it's all yours. I'm like, okay. So I freaking hop up in the turret. Well, I remember going into this village. It was kind of off the beaten path, if that makes any sense. But the thing that really sticks out to me is it was this tiny little path, like, to get into this village. And it was like a one-way in, one-way out kind of deal. And, from a tactical standpoint, that's bad, right? I mean, that's the time when something's going to happen, because if you don't ever want to take the same path out that you went in. So we go in, we do our thing, and we're coming back out. And of course, on our way back out, our front truck gets blown up, and the convoy comes to a halt. Well, I remember this guy. Somebody spotted this guy running across the field off to our right, and all these, basically all the turret gunners just kind of traversed right and laid waste to this guy running through the field. But I remember coming back out of that and was talking all this shit to these Air Force guys because, they didn't want to get up in their turret and do their job. And I've always looked back at that like, we always, all the branches kind of talk shit to one another, but we had a lot of experiences with the Air Force on that deployment that kind of, I don't know, it was...
That's back when the Air Force and Navy really had the bulk of the EOD that they were using for those deployments. So I experienced the same thing too, sort of, Dave. I never got to shoot like that, but with our EOD guys, we just kind of had to. If they didn't want to go on a mission, they didn't have to,
Yeah, exactly. But no, so, there's a few things like that. From what I can remember, we got blown up quite a bit. I think back on it, and I think of the Army, kind of Army logic. So we had these trucks that we used called the Husky, which was just a single person truck, and it was a big minesweeper. The whole job of this, the whole purpose of this vehicle was to drive over and look for mines that were buried. But this thing got blown up a lot because we probably only found 25% of these bombs. I mean, the other 75% found us, and that's just how it worked. But anyways, it got to the point where if a Husky found a bomb, we were basically just telling the Husky driver to drive over it and blow it up. And this Husky was really designed well to get blown up. The front and back frame, if you will, the frames were only held on to the cabin where you sat by 4 bolts, and basically the frame was designed to get blown up, and then this box that you sat in was designed to just kind of fall to the ground and protect the driver. And most of the time it did. But anyways, they started giving Purple Hearts to guys that were getting blown up in the Husky, and it was getting blown up so much that they were like, we'd start before missions, and they'd be like, all right, raise your hand if you want a Purple Heart. And the guy would raise his hand, and they'd be like, all right, you're driving the Husky today.
Oh, seriously?
I mean, it was stupid. Looking back on it, it's just kind of like Army logic. But you're gambling with your life, obviously, and I mean, thankfully for us, nobody got hurt in it, but it was stupid.
So did you end up driving the Husky yourself?
No, and I think I wanted to, but I literally couldn't fit. I'm kind of a bigger guy. I'm like 6'6". In the Army, I was about 240, maybe 235. But I literally could not fit in it, so I never drove it.
Gotcha. Okay. And that was a year-long deployment you guys did?
Yeah, it was about a year.
Okay.
I think they had talked about us getting extended toward the end of the year, but it didn't happen, and then we ended up being home right before Christmas, which was a blessing. But
and then, so did you stay at Fort Hood?
Yeah, and I didn't talk about it too much. Will McKinney and I became really good friends at Fort Hood, and I think just from getting there early at the same time, being on route detachment, and he really influenced me a lot. I had never met somebody like Will before, and my understanding, you know Will pretty well. His personality is a lot to handle sometimes, and like I said, I'd never met anybody like him, so he kind of changed me for the better in a lot of ways. I wasn't sheltered by any means, but I don't know how to describe it. He kind of made life a joke, and he gave me the ability not to take everything so seriously, and I could brush a lot of things off. And even to this day, I look back on him as somebody that really influenced me. But anyway, so when we were deployed, he re-enlisted, and I didn't. And I don't know why. I really don't have an answer back. I've looked back on that a lot. I can't really explain why I didn't re-enlist. I think at one point I wasn't eligible for some reason. I don't know if I didn't pass my last PT test or something like that. It was something stupid, but they said I wasn't eligible to re-enlist, so he re-enlisted, I didn't. And then when we came back to Fort Hood, he transferred to Fort Drum pretty quickly, like a month or two after we got back. And that kind of changed my look on the Army a little bit. And then I had a few other experiences. I broke my arm, I think at the end of 2000 and 2000, I think it was the end of 2010. And my unit came up for deployment again, and they wouldn't let me go on the deployment because my arm was broke. And I pushed and pushed. They told me that I was going to be out of this cast, within the first January or February of the next year. And I'm like, just let me go. I'm going to get out of this cast. I can be on the deployment, but they didn't let me go. And I think that really kind of made me sour.
So that was it for you? You decided to kind of end your time with the military?
Yeah, and so I spent the next year or so on rear detachment again, and it just wasn't a good experience for me. My unit was gone. My best friend in the Army was gone, and I got out. So a lot of times I wish I didn't. A lot of times I wish I had reenlisted and tried to go with Will, but it just didn't work. So I got out of the Army.
Surviving as a Civilian is brought to you in part by Vengeance Woodworks Company. Now, Vengeance Woodworks Company is a veteran-owned company that not only makes decorative handmade wooden flags for your house or wherever, but also makes coin holders, benches, shields, plaques, and other custom designs. Part of their cause donates 10% of all their wooden flags to the 22 Kill nonprofit organization. If you'd like to check out their products or order anything, go to their Instagram page at Vengeance Woodworks or on Facebook at Vengeance Woodworks Company. As a side note, they offer 100% money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied with your product. So please check them out and support those who support us. All right. So how was your transition out with the ACAP or SFL tap, whatever it was when you were getting out? What was your experience with that?
So I think, they try to do a good job. They try to set you up. They give you all this help to get into the professional field and be successful. What I look back on is the Army did a terrible job of really giving you certain life skills. The Army can teach you to wake up at a moment's notice. They can teach you to stay awake for days on end and function, but they don't teach you things that really, the other things, like finances and how to manage your I guess money is a big thing for me, but I came out of the Army in debt. Like I was a stupid 18-year-old. I didn't quite go as far as some guys did, as far as making wild purchases, and I didn't get married in the military. But I came out of the Army in debt, and like my credit score was terrible. They never taught me about that stuff, like credit and finances, and it took me a long while afterwards to get back on track. But as far as the other things, I think they did a really good job. I came out of the Army and went right into college and was pretty successful in college, and I credit that to the military. But and I worked a couple odd jobs here and there, and as far as my work ethic, I was, I knew how to be professional. I knew how to work hard. Those things.
So where did you go to college at?
I just went to a community college. So after I got out, a buddy and I that got out at the same time, we actually went to boot camp together and then went to different units at Fort Hood, and then ended up merging back into the same unit. They got rid of Echo 1-8 Cav, and it became like 2nd Special Troops Battalion or something. But anyways, he came back, and we were in the same unit. But we ended up getting out of the Army at the same time, and we kind of wanted to go somewhere random. I didn't want to go back to Cincinnati, and he didn't. He was from a tiny little town in Arkansas. He had no interest in going back there, so we literally just picked a random spot on a map and moved, and it ended up being Colorado.
Okay.
And there, it was. I literally closed our eyes and put our finger down on a map, and that was where we moved. And that was just kind of. So anyways, Colorado. It was Colorado, and then from there we kind of had to figure out where in Colorado. And I started looking at Colorado State University, which is a big school up in Fort Collins, which is northern Colorado. And after a little bit of thinking, I realized that I probably wasn't going to get into a big 4-year institution right out of the Army. So I ended up going to a community college up in Fort Collins called Front Range. And I did 2 years basically at the community college. I got my associate's degree.
Okay, so what were some of the? You said you did some odd jobs too. What were some of the odd jobs you ended up doing, kind of in your transition?
Well, it was mainly just to get a few extra bucks in my pocket. The GI Bill was paying for school. They give you a living stipend, which I think for me it was maybe $1,200 a month, something like that. But I initially got a job as a tow truck driver, which was kind of cool. I've always had an interest in mechanical stuff, and it was kind of dirty and gritty, and I enjoyed it. I did that for a couple months, and I ended up wrecking one of their tow trucks, and they kind of let me go after that. But I
Yeah.
didn't
So
really
who do you
wreck
call when
it.
a tow truck gets wrecked? I guess your own company comes out and gets you, huh?
Yeah, and I didn't actually wreck the truck. I broke the light bar on the top. It was stupid, but anyways, they let me go, and then I worked for a moving company called 2 Men in a Truck, and did that part time. But that was an awesome job. I mean, we worked hard and we got to drive all over. Actually, I did a couple of jobs did a job down to Arizona, a job out to LA. So that was pretty cool. But that was just to put a few extra bucks in my pocket while I was going to school full time.
So after you graduated, what was your next move?
Well, I befriended a guy in school. His name's Travis. He was a Marine vet, and for whatever reason, I had this track record of like becoming really good friends with Marines. But anyways, he's a really good guy, and got to the point where I'd actually moved in with him towards the end of my school. He was married at the time. But anyways, he went law enforcement, and after he graduated from the community college and then did like a semester or two up at Colorado State, and it just wasn't working out for him, or he didn't like it, I'm not sure, but he ended up getting in with a police academy, and so that kind of pushed me that direction. And I'd always had an interest in law enforcement. I thought that it was every kid at a certain age thinks that cops are cool, and then you get to a different age and you hate cops. But
so explain to me the process for applying for that, and all the way to graduation. I'm assuming you graduated.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so yeah, kind of break it down, because I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so every state's a little bit different. You have to get a state certification to work in law enforcement. In Colorado, it's called POST. It stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training. And you basically just have to get your POST certification. So the bigger departments in Colorado, like Denver and Aurora, and a few others, they have their own academies. So you would get hired by those those departments, and then they would put you through their own academy. But the other way to do it is you can get, colleges have basically a police academy set up. So you can go through school, a college, and it's a police academy. And then you get your certification that way. So then you come out with a certification, and then you're hireable by any department in the state of Colorado. So that's the route I went, and I went that way because I still had GI money left, and the GI Bill paid for my police academy basically because it was through a accredited community college.
Okay, so you could either go to like one of the big cities. They have their own individual police academy, right? Is what you're saying?
Right.
And then,
right.
So like somebody who goes like a Denver police academy couldn't go and apply for like a Aurora police.
No, they could
after you graduate, though. I'm assuming, right?
Afterwards, yeah. So
okay.
the certification's all the same. It's just the route that you go to get it.
So how does the college then do the physical portion of it?
So they kind of they have the whole academy program set up, and then the school that I went to kind of contracted out for various portions of the academy. So like the Colorado State Patrol taught us our driving skills. They taught us our physical portion. All of our PT was done with State Patrol, and our driving instruction was done through State Patrol. And then like there was somebody else that they contracted out for the firearms portion, because you have to have like so many hours in driving instruction, so many hours in physical, so many hours in shooting to get your certification.
Did any of your military experience help you kind of knock out some of those before you went to the other certifications, or did you have to do everything?
No, I had to do everything. I was definitely prepared, and my mindset was on point. But no, you had to get everything through the school.
So you were pretty. Would you say it was probably easier than basic training AIT?
Oh, yeah, hands down. I mean, it was. Like I said, this was the easy route. The places that have their own academies, they try to run them paramilitary. State Patrol, Colorado State Patrol is actually pretty well known for having a really strict paramilitary police academy. I mean, it's like the first like 2 months, they have it set up just like boot camp. I mean, you're living in their quarters, and they freaking wake you up screaming at you all the time. But
I bet you it was a pretty
route.
easy choice for you to make, huh?
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah,
you'd already
it was,
done all that and experienced all that.
exactly. And there, within my academy, there was a few of us that were veterans, obviously, and they really valued the veterans because we just had that work ethic that was different. We had been through this stuff before. We knew, we worked hard, and we didn't get bothered by people freaking being mean to us or whatever.
Yeah, did you find it easier to get through the police academy because of that than the rest of the students that had not been through the military?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't remember anybody dropping out from my academy. But yeah, I mean, so they had like these leadership roles within the academy, and naturally, most of the military guys fell into those. I was like, I don't remember. I was like the assistant class president or something like that. I mean, it was nothing to brag about, but just saying that naturally these military guys kind of fell into those roles.
Hey, I got a quick question. I just thought. So, do they run their ranges, weapons ranges, the same way the military runs them, especially in the training aspect? Are they pretty strict?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have range safety officers, and everybody's set up on a line, and obviously we don't have the large variety of weapons like we did in the military. Your primary weapons in law enforcement are your rifle and a handgun. But no, the ranges are set up strict, and there's multiple range officers that are out there all the time. So.
Okay, so you graduate the academy. Then what's your how do assignments work, or where was your first assignment?
So basically, towards the end of the academy, you start. All the guys. Some guys are sponsored by departments. That may not have had their own academy, but they were basically hired by these agencies with the condition that they have to go through this academy. So some guys had like guaranteed jobs coming out. Others didn't. So towards the end of the academy, you basically have to start looking for jobs. And I applied with one agency called Greeley, City of Greeley, which is kind of like northeast. Well, not northeast, but a little bit east of Fort Collins. And then I didn't get that job. I came down to like the top 4 candidates. But anyways, I didn't get picked for them. And then Commerce City is actually where the second agency that I had applied at, and I ended up getting hired by them. So Commerce City is a metro suburb of Denver. We border Denver on the northeast corner.
Is it okay? So is it pretty busy then? You got a pretty big, large amount of population.
Our population's not super high. I want to say we're probably right around the 65 to 70,000 people.
Okay.
But it's a very very busy department, and it has a reputation across Colorado as being a very rough, busy department. It's just the town itself is very blue collar, very industrial. A lot of low income. A large portion of the population is low income. It's just kind of a working community, and the city's growing, so the city is kind of expanding northeast, and they've built a lot of new developments, and trying to revamp the city, the view of the city, kind of. But the old Commerce City, which borders Denver, has had a reputation for being pretty tough. So our department we have, and my numbers are probably a little off because it's always changing, but I think we have somewhere around 130 sworn personnel, and of that, there's probably 50 or 60 officers on patrol.
Okay, so what do you mean by sworn? You talk about actual officers, not the admin people and things like that, right?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Gotcha.
So in a department, you have your sworn personnel, which are like your supervisors and detectives, and guys that are basically are post-certified police officers.
Okay. So how long, what year was that you actually got hired on? I'm trying to keep track of you chronologically.
Yeah. Sorry. So
No,
that was 2014.
Okay, so not that long ago.
Then I got no, about coming up on 7 years.
Okay, so you've been doing this for 7 years?
Yeah.
How do you like it?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Well, so let me ask you this: do you like it better or worse than when you first started 7 years ago? Almost 7 years ago.
The work itself, I love the work. I mean, I wouldn't choose anything else for a career. But I'm sure you're not blind, to our world that we live in, and the problem with law enforcement is how much it is influenced by politics. And there's been a lot of change in the past year and a half. Really, I mean, since the day I started, and there's, when I started, there was the old breed, the old guys that would tell you that the same thing, that it wasn't the same as when they started, and I think that's just that's just the way it goes. But I think there's been a very large push for change in the past year and a half that maybe not, it's been more spread out in the years before that.
So let me tell you one thing I will tell you just from coming from me personally is that I have a crazy amount of respect for law enforcement people. And the reason being is, so now you know both sides of the coin. Like when you're in the military, you most of the time know when you're going to deploy. You know how long you're going to be gone for. You know what kind of threats happening. But at most, they're like a year, maybe 15-month deployments. Police officers and law enforcement officials do that every day. Like every day there could be a firefight. You know what I mean? And I have so much respect because I think about the amount of stress that I personally would go through on patrols day, just the year I'd be deployed. I can't imagine that guys that do that 20, 30 years, for their lifetime. So I do have a lot of respect, and I do not understand what that's like, but I have a large appreciation for what you guys do based on that, my experience alone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's like any job that you do, any job at all, you get jaded, and in law enforcement, it's easy to think that everybody's out to get you because you're dealing with a lot of bad people. I mean, that's for the most part, that's our job, right? We deal with bad people. So naturally, over time, you start to look at your job like, well, everybody's out to get me. So you really got to be conscious about protecting yourself, and that comes down to you hear stories of cops getting ambushed at restaurants. You hear, a couple years ago in New York City, those two cops were just sitting in their car and a guy came up and shot him in the side of the head. You can't prepare for all that stuff, but you have to do the best you can. So, you're driving everywhere looking for a place where you can park that's safe, you got to back yourself in somewhere in a dark corner and where your only threat is in front of you. You shouldn't have to think that way, but that's just the way it kind of goes.
So what is your day-to-day job, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. So I've been rocking patrol basically since the day I got on.
Now you patrol the city?
Yeah. So I'm just a patrol cop. We have basically our city broken up into, well, it's changed recently. I couldn't even tell you how many districts we technically have, but basically our city is divided up into 4 quadrants, if you will. You have the north half of our city, and there's basically an east and west half to the north, and then on the south side you have it's broken up horizontally. So you have a southernmost district and the middle district, if you will.
Okay.
So just to make it simple, basically we'll just say we have districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I've been working, really the district that I've been in, District 1, which is our southernmost district. I've been working that for the majority of my career. And I come in, we work 12-hour shifts, come in and our shift starts at, I work a swing shift, so we start in the middle of the afternoon and then 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. basically. And that's changed. I worked graveyards for a couple years. I worked day shift for a year. I'll tell you, I hate working during the daytime.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah, it's just, like I said, our city is really busy. And during the daytime, the population of our city triples. I mean, just with the amount of industry we have, and there's a lot of we have a refinery in our city, so there's a buttload of semis and oil trucks and all sorts of other people working in the city. So it's just like, for example, sitting at a stoplight, you might get stuck at one stoplight for 3 cycles. And for me, I hate that. I can't stand it. Like I gotta go, I gotta get to where I'm going. And on Graves or, the nighttime, nobody's out on the streets, like it's free driving. You're dealing with less like hustle and bustle. You're still busy going to all your calls, but it's just not the same. At the PD, and this kind of comes from the military, I would say that all the brass is gone. All the admin staff that's there at the end of the daytime, they're gone. At night, it's just you and the guys that are working the road.
I can't imagine how much of a struggle it would be for me if I was in your situation, sitting in a stoplight on the second cycle, knowing I just have to flip a switch and turn the thing on and leave. Yeah, that takes some discipline right there, because I'm sure there's more guys than not that would actually do that.
And there's a lot of misconceptions. There is priority levels with calls we go to, and for us, it's like priority 1 through 3, or 0 through 3, I guess. But priority 0 being the highest, and then 3 is your lowest priority. So every department has a different policy, but generally, your priority 1 and 0 calls you can run lights and sirens to, but that's just based on the information that comes out for the call, right? So you might get a call that comes out that's not a high priority. It might be like a fight in progress, or what we would say a disturbance. We can't run code to that, just based on a fight. Like if it's just a fight, but that being said, it's still something that you got to get to promptly. We're not going to just take our time getting to that call. So, when it comes to like getting stuck at a light, you might see a cop going to this call, and from the outside, you just see him flip on his lights and go through the light and then turn off his lights, and you're like, motherfucker, like that guy, when in reality, and inside his car, he's just doing what he has to do to get to this fight, because his policy says he can't run lights and sirens, but he still has to get there in a timely manner, So, anyways,
what's been your this last 7 years? So, what is there anything significant being a police officer you'd like to share with all of us?
Well, I think I know. Brian told me. Brian Shapiro, sorry, that's another guy that I'm friends with. He
speaking of which,
said something to you.
Speaking of which, can you imagine having Shapiro and McKinney in your same platoon?
Dude,
that was my reality.
The two of them together, I feel for you, because the two of those guys together is like, it's something else. They feed off each other.
It was exhausting. Let me tell you. But
they showed up at my house last year on Christmas, and they were both wasted. So we spent our Christmas day with Brian and Will just wasted, and that was our Christmas day.
And they showed up drunk, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So anyways, so probably, I guess, the highlights of my career thus far. I got into a shooting in 2017.
And that's where we're going to end this week. Part 2 with David Adams is next week.